Welcome to Taiwan Frontlines. I'm Bonnie Glazer, Managing Director of the Indo-Pacific Program at the German Marshall Fund of the United States.
And I'm Jason Shu, Senior Fellow at the Hudson Institute and former legislator from Taiwan.
Drones are at the center of the global defense conversation, and nowhere is that more strategically consequential than Taiwan. Lai Ching-te's administration has made drone production a national priority, committing roughly $3 billion to building out a domestic ecosystem with more investment expected. Taiwan understands that resilient, non-red supply chains and scalable autonomous systems are essential to deterrence. Today, we're joined by Brendan Tseng, co-founder and president of Shield AI, an American aerospace and defense technology company. Brandon previously served 7 years in the U.S. Navy as both a Navy SEAL and a surface warfare officer. He deployed twice to Afghanistan as well as to the Pacific Theater in the Arabian Gulf. And it was during those deployments that he saw firsthand the risks service members face in complex combat environments, experiences that ultimately led him to found Shield AI with the mission of protecting service members and civilians through intelligent, autonomous systems. Shield AI recently signed a teaming agreement with Aerospace Industrial Development Corporation, a Taiwanese aerospace company based in Taichung, marking an important step in deepening cooperation on trusted drone production and autonomous capabilities.
In today's episode, we'll explore what it takes to build secure drone supply chains and how Taiwan's Coast Guard and Navy fit into the evolving deterrence picture, and what the next era of autonomous warfare look like in Taiwan Strait. Welcome to Taiwan Frontline, Brandon.
Thank you so much for having me.
Let me dive right in, Brandon. You've worked at the intersection of defense technology, supply chains. What does Taiwan sit in the center of the conversation right now?
Look, Taiwan is taking a lot of right steps as they think about deterring China, deterring an invasion. Obviously, they're trying to get a very large defense special budget passed, which I think is a good move. It signals to China, it signals to the United States, signals to the world that they're very serious. As part of that defense special budget, there's a lot of calls for a lot of asymmetric capabilities, drones. They've called for the development of 40,000 domestically produced drones, but also they're looking to international allies and partners, the United States, in terms of what capabilities they can bring to the table. Because as we get into this conversation, I think it's important to talk about the different types of drones out there, everything from the tactical to the strategic, and everything in between. But I think it's, look, if you're in the national security space, the global security space, at the intersection of AI and drones, and care very much about what's going on in the region, I can't think of a more exciting place to be. And Taiwan's doing a lot of things out there. That's over the next now and into the next several years.
Yeah. Before we go further, can you give us just a high-level overview of the capability of a Shield AI does in terms of combining both software and hardware in terms of its interoperable platform that Taiwan is in critical need of?
Yeah, sure. So in pursuit of our mission to protect service members and civilians, we are building the world's best AI pilot and next generation unmanned systems, aircraft. Our easiest way to think about an AI pilot is self-driving technology for unmanned systems. It enables them to operate while GPS and communications are jammed, enables the concept of autonomous mission execution, and then enables the concept of swarming or teaming. And so we are putting this AI pilot on a lot of different aircraft. We were recently selected by the U.S. Air Force to provide the AI pilot to Anduril's Fury collaborative combat aircraft. aircraft. We've integrated this AI pilot on 26 different platforms at this stage in the game. We're working with Taiwan's NSIS, their National Science and Technology Institute, to help them indigenize this capability so that they don't have to rely on U.S. companies and don't have to rely on the U.S. to build out AI pilots. And then on the aircraft side of things, we're building two different aircraft. One, our VBAT aircraft, it's a reconnaissance drone, does the exact same mission as Predator or Reaper drones for a fraction of the cost. It's interdicted 100,000 pounds of narcotics last year with the U.S. Coast Guard. We're executing missions every single day in Ukraine, all while GPS and communications are jammed. We're doing really cool stuff in the Middle East. Can't talk about it. And then we're building a next generation AI piloted fighter jet called the XBAT, which is a vertical takeoff, launch, and land fighter jet. So those are the capabilities, but, really excited to chat about, what we're doing, how it relates to the Taiwan front lines, and excited to chat with you all.
Yeah, fantastic. And Brandon, from your perspective, is the deterrence in the Taiwan Strait stronger or weaker than it was 5 years ago?
Look, I think it's stronger. And so I had the opportunity probably about 3 weeks ago. I was in Taiwan, had the opportunity to speak with Admiral May, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Taiwan. And he was telling us also, he's like, look, in the past 4 or 5 years, they've made major efforts. And you can see it, right? When, I can see it as a former SEAL. And when I go around to their military bases, speak to their officers, speak to their warfighters, you can see they're taking the problem very seriously, right? You can see that in their entire civilian population as they start to adopt this idea of resilience in terms of some of the initiatives the government has rolled out, like what to do in the event of an invasion. And then you can see it in terms of like their what they're building out, how they're thinking about the problem, how they're thinking about fighting asymmetrically in said situation. And so I think they've made great strides. I don't think they're there yet, right? I still think there is room to, like, they have to move forward on a couple of key initiatives, but you can see the will to build out the capabilities to deter, and you can see a lot of action that's taking place as it's executed. And that's from everybody from, the president, vice president, down to the senior military officers, all the way down to the warfighters and even the civilian population.
What are the main lessons, Brandon, that you think that Taiwan should take away from the Ukraine war and other uses of uncrewed systems around the world in conflicts? And are they learning them?
Yep. No, absolutely. Look, I think there's two primary lessons. One is that the electronic warfare environment is going to be very prevalent in any type of hot conflict between China, Taiwan, the U.S., and allies in the region. And that's to say that the very first thing the Russians did, the very first thing the Chinese did, the very first thing the U.S. does when we go into these areas, China's going to jam GPS. They're going to jam communication systems, right? And what that does is it disables so many weapon systems that are reliant on it. It obviously disables maneuver when you need communications, not just, weapon systems or drones, but like people. It's very hard to maneuver when you maneuver in a coordinated fashion when you don't have that communications. And again, that's something that's prevalent in Ukraine. And so, something I've encouraged all the military leaders in Taiwan to take very seriously is, hey, before you buy any weapon systems, before you buy drone systems, like, make sure they are working in that GPS communications jammed environment. Ask the Ukrainians about it, leverage their learnings from that. And I do think they've taken that seriously in many respects, but at the same time, look, there's just not a lot of capabilities that are capable of operating when GPS and communications are jammed. And that's like the sad truth of the matter. The second thing that I think they need to focus on is really, and this is where Ukraine, I think, I would say they're fallen short and they're building back better here, but it's to recognize that there's a spectrum of drones, there's a spectrum of capability, and your indigenous population's only going to be able to do, can only do a certain aspect of that, right? In the United States, we can build tactical, operational, strategic level type capabilities. Ukraine, they leaned on what they were able to do, which was build tactical drones. These are one-way attack drones. These are quadcopters. And that's why you have seen them very successfully been able to, stop Russia, right? They've been able to prevent advance, but it's very much a war of attrition where each side is slinging tactical drones. If you ask Ukrainian senior officers, where they think they could have done better, where they think they got wrong in the early stages, is leaning more on those strategic level capabilities, right? And this is the ability to penetrate deeper, target deeper, all while GPS and communications are jammed, right? The Ukrainians have the ability to affect the battle space from 0 to 30 kilometers regularly, right? I acknowledge they've done some strategic operations, but those are far and few between. What the United States is world-class at is executing strategic operations on a daily basis, hitting strategic targets on a daily basis. And we have the capabilities to do so. We have the capabilities to build them. I think it's really important for Taiwan to acknowledge it's like, look, yeah, you have a very sophisticated industrial base. I believe you can build out those tactical capabilities, which are extremely important when you're playing defense in the way that they would be in such a scenario. But you still have to have that spectrum. You need those strategic level assets, the ability to operate while GPS communications are jammed, the ability to affect mainland China should something occur, right? And it's not to say that, you're using those basically as a deterrent. You're acquiring those capabilities as a deterrent for such an invasion.
Can you talk about the idea of the non-red supply chain and how difficult that is in your industry? My understanding is, there's got thousands of components that go into drones, and some of them for a long time have been coming from China.
Yeah. Look, the good news is I think the United States got ahead of this very, very early on. I don't remember when Section 848 of the NDAA was passed that prohibited critical components. I want to say maybe it's like 2020, maybe it was 2019. I actually don't. It was done pretty early, I would say early on as this drone industry has evolved. But most companies now should be able to adhere to such a supply chain. I think you'll see that from more mature drone companies. Certainly Shield AI, we're part of the Blue UAS program with our VBAT. We're Section 848 NDAA compliant. We're not using any critical components from China. I don't think we're using any screws, right, from China for that matter, in anything that we do. I think you'll see smaller, like, in Taiwan, certainly there's a very entangled supply chain with mainland China and a lot of manufacturing from mainland China, and a lot of commercial businesses have manufacturing facilities in mainland China. I think it's probably a more of a challenge for Taiwan to completely unentangle itself as it builds that drone capability, drone industry. And it's something that I think you could see the Taiwan government lean in more on as they recognize this is more important. Because to the point of, if you're building one-way tactical drones on island and you're using screws from China, and all of a sudden those screws stop coming. It's like, look, screws aren't the hardest thing to replicate, but you're going to lose time as you need to, build, I'm using screws, maybe like propellers, whatever it is. It's like, look, you're going to have to find a second source. You're going to have to spin it up versus already having it, in-house.
Yeah, delving deeper into the Taiwan's drone ecosystem, you've interacted with NCIST and ADIC, and then there's also a kind of a new industry boom of the local grown drone industries such as Tiger or like Geostat. What do you see as the strength and the weakness as Taiwanese government is looking to develop the local drone supply chain? And in your experience, especially working with NCIST and ADIC, how would you advise Taiwan to develop this industry?
Yeah. Look, we I think in Taiwan 3 weeks ago, our team was there 4 weeks ago. What they were doing was they were meeting with the top 10 drone manufacturers in Taiwan and working with NCIST. And the reason we're meeting with them is because we want to help them build those AI pilots that will enable these drones to work when GPS and comms are jammed, that will enable swarming and teaming. And we want to help them indigenize that ability to build that software themselves. And so it goes into a bit of like where you think they're strong, where you think they're weak. Look, I think on one, there's a will, there's any drone business, and I've been doing Shield AI for 11 years, it's really easy to get out prototypes. It's hard to make things more reliable. And I would say reliability becomes more important the more operational strategic level you get. And so where I think Taiwan, is probably, strong, they have a drone base that they can build the tactical drones at. I think they're weak on the strategic side and are going to lean in on the USA to basically bring on those strategic capabilities where they realize there's a gap. And the thing that I caution all countries on, it's like, look, building out that strategic level capability or the ability to produce strategic level capabilities is really, really hard. It's really expensive. For the same reason, right? The United States would love TSMC is building out a factory in the United States. To say the USA could just do that overnight is not true, right? This is going to take 10 plus years. It's going to require billions of dollars of investment on both sides. But the United States recognizes like this is a capability we want. I think it's fine if Taiwan were to say, look, we actually do want to invest in strategic capabilities. They've built out their own indigenous submarine. But that was a long project, a long way to get there. And that's like the first submarine, right? And so it's like, if you want it to become institutionalized, I think it's fine. You just recognize it's going to be a long period of time and very expensive. For the same reason, you don't see, I think countries sometimes like, oh, just build every drone there is. It's like, look, there's a big difference between building a one-way attack drone, a quadcopter, something like we build, which is a VBAT or even a fighter jet drone. It's like saying, well, name your aerospace company, you guys should go build a 737. It's like there is a level of complexity and investment that is required. And so I do think it's good that Taiwan's leaning on the tactical side, will lean on the strategic side for drones elsewhere. And I think it's how you get those quick wins quickly. And like, look, as this, as time goes on, and we're talking about like, if Taiwan would like to make the investment to bring on strategic capability, I think it's like fine to do so. But you shouldn't think if you're trying to solve a 3-year problem, that's not how you solve. That's like solving a 10-year, 15-year problem. If you want to institutionalize the ability to build strategic level assets in the same way the USA does, and I think they know that. Obviously, have gone through that motion with their submarine program.
Can you talk about the counter-drone capabilities and how you see that evolving? China's capabilities, but also Taiwan's.
Yeah. So first and foremost, I'm a big proponent of shoot the arrow. Shoot the archer. Shoot the archer, not the arrow. I had so many mortars shot at me in Afghanistan. We had close-in weapon systems, and it's like whenever we were on our base, it's like let's just go take care of the root cause of the problem, which is the person launching it. This is a challenge that we're facing in Iran too, where people are talking about interceptors. It's like, look, I understand the importance of interceptors. I understand the importance of force protection. But solve the root cause of solve the root cause of the problem, solve the root cause of the cancer, go after the archer. And that's why I purposefully we've built Shield AI's built out targeting capabilities that enable you to go after the archer. All right. All that being said, yes, I think it is important for interceptors. Look, I think, and it's not Shield AI, we're working on the AI side of these interceptors with some Ukrainian companies. Ukraine is best in the world at intercepting drones. You see that with the Emiratis, the Saudis. Who are they buying interceptors from? Not the USA. They are buying interceptors from President Zelensky. They're buying it from the Ukrainians. And I would encourage Taiwan to lean on that. Again, Ukraine's just institutionalized that knowledge and has built out those capabilities. Interceptors are a tactical capability in terms of, being able to just hit, an incoming Shahed type drone. And again, I think you're going to want a mix of that. Yes, you want some type of Patriot missile batteries to take out, any very, very big missile systems that China has. But on the interceptor side, look, China's going to have a massive industrial base of systems. And so I think it's important to invest in that area. At the same time, I will say it's like interceptors are not deterrents. They are force protection. And so I think it's important for, these countries to it's like, it doesn't matter how many interceptors you build. That's not what's going to stop China at the, of making a invasion decision calculus at the end of the day.
When Taiwan looks at its threat environment, it's extremely concerned about what's often referred to as gray zone threats, those that stay below the threshold that would really prompt a military strike. And China has really excelled at developing a toolkit for that. And so how do drones fit into that equation when we're looking at paramilitary capabilities? We've got Coast Guard operating around various small islands around Taiwan. And of course, recently, I think it was in January, a Chinese drone flew over Pratas Island for the first time. So how does this fit into Taiwan's capabilities?
Yeah. Look, I think drones are like they're gray zone. They're gray zone and like, hot conflict assets to the point where it's like, look, if Taiwan were to intercept a Chinese drone, I don't think that leads to, someone saying a declaration of war, like we're going at it, right? And I think that's the positive thing. Same thing we saw, I want to, maybe it was Trump's first term, where the Iranians shot down one of our reconnaissance, one of the U.S.'s reconnaissance drones, and it was like, all right, that's okay, right? There's not... That's like a good thing from the proliferation of drones. It actually buys humans more decision-making time. It's not putting a human life at risk, which can quickly escalate things. I think to the point of where Taiwan really needs to lean in here. You talk to some Ukrainian leaders; they wish they had been able to put up 1,000 drones on the Ukrainian border that could operate while GPS and communications were jammed. 4 weeks before the invasion, and Putin, would have been like, all right, maybe not today, right? And that's what deterrence is about. At the end of the day, it's forcing the executive authority of another country to say, well, maybe not today, because you want to buy diplomacy another day at the end of the day. And so I think that's what Taiwan, and something I've spoken with their leaders about, it's like you actually want to just start proliferating drones around the perimeter of Taiwan that can operate while GPS communications are jammed, that are tied into these weapon systems, so that China's basically like, okay, this is a new type of capability that's here. This makes us rethink, our equation as we think about invasion. And so let's go back to the drawing board. That's where I think it's super helpful for them to be operating these systems on a regular basis. And the advantage that these systems allow, because it's not, combat air patrols that you have fighter pilots going at it again, where that can quickly escalate things in the worst of scenarios.
The software piece of the Shield AI, which is the hive mind with the interoperable platform that allows different devices to kind of develop this modern warfare readiness and capability and prediction models. How ready do you think Taiwan's military operational system is ready for this type of autonomous system? And from your conversations with our military leaders, what are the gaps or some of the areas of improvements that are needed to address these autonomous system adaptations?
Yeah, look, I think I think Taiwan's very ready to adopt. I think the good thing is, and I say this with any country with a smaller military, it's really hard to change a large military, a large bureaucracy. The United States has this challenge where it's like, okay, you want to modernize U.S. military? You're talking, that is just as it's hard for a large company to change how they do business, right? Because there's so many things that have been institutionalized. There's a bureaucracy. It's much easier for smaller companies to change and adapt. That's the same true of militaries. And so where I think Taiwan is really interesting is like they don't have, I mean, yes, they have some institutional like legacy systems, processes, but it's not so large that it's cumbersome, right? They can be more agile, more adaptive to the environment and what's happening. And that's what I am seeing out of them, right? Where they are very quick. NSYST has been using our enterprise product that enables them to build AI. They were building their own AI at the end of the week, right? With a very little instruction from Shield AI in terms of doing it. And now they're integrating it onto different drone systems. And so again, I just think it's you see very positive. I see very positive indicators of a country that's really mobilizing around it. What you want to see is, this is the important thing, is like you want to see them see it through, because that's what's going to matter at the end of the day. It doesn't matter these small wins, some of these small anecdotes that I've observed. It's great behavior, but we're talking about doing it across the entire military force. But again, the good news is there's momentum.
Yeah. From a realistically technological point of view, how capable is the hive mind being able to integrate the existing system and as well as adapting the new type of system that's been brought in from the Shield perspective? And what I'm trying to say is like how ready Taiwan can quickly transform itself to be autonomous ready.
Yeah. Look, the technology is moving at a ridiculous speed. And you can see this in the consumer industry, right? Consumer technology, we're seeing it too. For Shield AI, what used to take us, 150 engineers in 2 years to do, we can now do with like 2 engineers in 1 week. It's crazy how quickly new capabilities can be built. They can be integrated. They can be deployed very, very rapidly. And so, again, I think I'm not worried about. I'm not worried about the ability to quickly integrate with Taiwanese systems, Taiwanese military systems, whether it's from a communication standpoint, whether it's from a software integration standpoint. But you do have to have the leadership. You have to have the will to see it through. And again, I'm not worried about that either. I just think I'm just calling it out as like perhaps the most important thing is just someone to say, yes, let's make this happen and go see it through so that it, goes into the entire, entire organization, right? And that's Shield AI is doing this ourselves, right? Where we're saying, okay, what are the new AI tools? We had 2 meetings this week, and we build our own, but there's other things out there. And we're saying, okay, well, how are we institutionalizing this across the entirety of our company, all 1,400 people, right? And that's coming from our CEO, that's coming from me, that's coming from, my brother, our other co-founder, our CTO. It is you're seeing a top-down and bottom-up push to make sure this happens in our company. I think you have to see the same thing out of any organization, military, government.
So you've talked a lot about Taiwan's strengths.
Yep.
What do you see as potential weaknesses? There's some very unique things about Taiwan, and I think the structure of its military, civil relations. Where do you find that there are potential issues challenges Taiwan has to overcome?
Yeah. The one last strength, Taiwan is such a
we can focus on the strengths.
I will focus. It's not, and look, I'm sincere when I say there aren't a lot of weaknesses. Now the problem is you have the most overwhelming power sitting, I don't know, whatever that distance is, 150 miles, 200
miles.
Yeah, 100 miles from you, right? And the industrial production capacity of China is not to be discounted in any way. And so when I say what is Taiwan's weakness, it's it doesn't matter, right? Taiwan's super strong. They're getting stronger. It's just you have Goliath over here on the other end that poses a massive threat to you. Now, the one thing, and this is in warfare, and as a SEAL, and seeing how Taiwan is situated, terrain matters so much, and it is the hardest target on the face of the planet to take. And that would be and look, I've seized a lot of targets in my time in the SEAL teams. I've done a lot of, looked at lots of different satellite imagery, been to lots of different places. And one of the things we would do in the SEAL teams, okay, put myself on, in the enemy's shoes. How am I doing this? How am I doing this target? And you look at Taiwan, you're like, oh my God, one, the weather, the tropical weather's a problem, right? It's raining all the time there. It's an island. So that, now you have to deal with the sea state. Then you look, it's okay, it is mountainous, jungle, urban terrain, which is just if you get into a conflict there, it would be absolute hell for whoever is trying to take that country. And look, I went to, I've been to Kyiv many times also in terms of what we're doing to support the Ukrainians. Always boggles my mind how the Russians were trying to take Kyiv. You're like, oh my God, this must have been an absolute hellhole for them in terms of that urban terrain. There are mega skyscrapers in Kyiv as well. And you're like, obviously the Russians got pushed back in Kyiv. But then you look at Taiwan, you're like, oh my God, it's got mega structures across the entirety of the island. And again, coupled with that jungle mountain terrain, you're like, this would be that's like one of their greatest strengths is, despite what they're doing on the government, on the military side, just a natural stronghold. So, but then you got Goliath, right next to you. So
speaking of Goliath, Brent, do we have any knowledge of how good Chinese drones are these days and what they are learning from the various battlegrounds they're getting themselves into by supplying components or even drones to Russia?
It's really hard. So China's, and you know this, right? It's very, very opaque in terms of the information available, the information that you can extract, especially from, the military aspect of it. And so I'm always cautious about making proclamations about where China is in terms of their military capabilities. Now, what I like, two things, again, we'll just which is a reiteration, like their production capacity is off the charts. And this worries me, but the only thing that gives me solace here is that if you combine USA and, every ally in the world, I would actually claim that, China versus US plus the rest of the world, we're going to be able to match or exceed that production capacity that's coming out of China. But if it was just China versus USA, no, China's going to beat us on production. The second aspect of what concerns me about China, because it doesn't really matter where they are. It matters how quickly they iterate and adapt, right? And so that's the other thing is they iterate and adapt faster than any other large superpower there is. So it doesn't matter if you start right here and the US is here, but your growth rate is slower or your iteration rate is slower. China's cycle time is ridiculously fast in terms of how they're adapting, how they're pumping out new capabilities. And that's what concerns me more than where they are today. Because I'll proclaim absolutely US is better at software. We are better at large scale military operations. We can build more exquisite systems. But to the point earlier, it doesn't matter. It's well, can China iterate faster? They can in many, many different ways. So,
well, many people think that the most likely scenario that Taiwan will face would be a blockade. So what are the roles of drones in a blockade scenario, and how can they help Taiwan?
Yeah. So two components. One, you have to have the intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, and targeting. And so this is something, because the public always goes towards these one-way attack drones, like all the missiles, right? The unmanned surface vessels that explode. Important, but the reason why you see the United States in the first 48 hours being able to execute 1,000 target packages in Iran is because we have a massive intelligence and targeting apparatus, and we have the intelligence and targeting assets. General McChrystal in Afghanistan, he'd say intelligence drives operations, right? Myself as a SEAL platoon commander, we weren't going out on an operation unless we had intelligence packages, targeting packages. And so step one is have the assets that enable you to build these targeting packages in the event of a blockade, because even, and we see this in Ukraine, we pair up with one-way attack drones. We pair our VBAT, which is a reconnaissance and targeting drone, is pairing up with these one-way attack drones. It's providing terminal guidance. It's enabling you to do battlefield damage assessment because, again, it's about how you iterate from that first strike. And this wasn't a capability that was prevalent in Ukraine for a long time. And so they would fire these one-way attack drones. They don't know if they hit it. They don't know if they actually did damage. You have to be able to iterate, drive the cycle time down so you can say, now when we do an attack in Ukraine, it's okay, hit him again, hit him again. It's okay, doing battlefield damage assessment. Okay, there's a quick reaction force and evacuation team. Hit the evacuation team in terms of what's going on. You want to be able to do that, but you need those reconnaissance and targeting assets to be able to do it. Then the second aspect is, and so again, Shield AI's VBAT, and something that we're eager to get integrated into the Taiwan's military. We're working that aspect of it. The second component is these one-way attack drones, these unmanned surface vessels. I think are extremely important as it relates to the idea of a blockade around Taiwan. And so, unmanned surface vessels, unmanned underwater vehicles, one-way attack drones, you name it. The idea of making Taiwan a porcupine, I very much agree with. That's not my original thought. Like, I think everybody's like, yeah, make it as hard a target as possible, and wreak havoc on anybody who's trying to do something across the straits. And again, I think people are seeing this. You see this with the Strait of Hormuz. I'm sure China's taking notice. It's like, oh, locking that thing down. It's a hard challenge, and if you don't, you're going to take losses in a big way.
Maybe one final question, Brandon. One of the biggest pain point when it comes to arms procurement in Taiwan is this long delay and backlog deliveries. And that's been the issues both on the U.S. prime and as well as the production capacity. And I understand that Shield AI adopts a very lean supply chain and is able to quick turn out new productions. So if Taiwan were to procure from Shield AI today, and what's your delivery capability, and how quickly can you make those drones? And given what's going on in the world right now,
we can deliver by September. The drones to Taiwan, right, which is like 5 months away. We're building, and that just is where we are in terms of our backlog. And if there was a reason to do it within 3-4 months, we could push other customers back in terms of like the urgency to do it. But plans right now to start to delivering capability in September. But you're calling out something also more important, because I've seen this too. It's the other benefit of some of these small tactical drones is actually the production time. And sorry, VBAT is actually, again, it's got a tactical level footprint that's providing strategic capability. I think that you're going to see that more and more. The MQ-9 Reaper Predator drone. Again, I said VBAT does the exact same mission of this drone. I used MQ-9, MQ-1 in Afghanistan. I loved the heck out of that drone. It was an amazing asset for intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, and targeting. I think prior to the Iran conflict, the United States, we had lost 27 of them against the Houthis in the Middle East. I think we've lost 16 of them in the first, we're 4 weeks into this conflict with Iran. These are $40 million aircraft being shot down by $1 million weapon systems. Wow. I actually think this is the military's way of like just getting rid of it, so it's no longer a line item. Because
I've heard that from
they're like, we're just gonna use it and they'll get shot down, which is fantastic. No, we'll just not order more. But right to the point of like, building a $40 million aircraft takes a lot longer time also than building a $1 million aircraft, in the same way that, building a 787 is a lot longer than, building a Cessna, right? In terms of just like the different types of capabilities and what's required. That's short to say. It's like, I think, look, and I don't want to discount Taiwan needs some of those missile systems. They need some of the strategic weapon systems. But again, I think of a high-low mix, lean heavily on, indigenous capability for tactical, one-way attack drones, for quadcopters, etc. Lean on partners and allies, just because there is a here and now problem for the strategic capabilities.
Brandon Tseng, co-founder of Shield AI, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.